Take a little walk to the edge of town and go across the track where the
Richmond, Virginia.
How are you, Patrick?
We can hear you, Patrick.
Doing all right, thank you. How are you guys doing?
We're fine.
Thank you for calling in.
Well, I was watching your exchange with Cobain the Christian on YouTube the other day. I watched the whole thing. I have a question in relation to something you said in it. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I want to make sure I'm stating you correctly, but you were talking about historical evidence for a miracle, and you said that a literary account, it's not sufficient to establish a miracle's happening literally in history. That's by your own standards. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So let's consider the example of the feeding of the 5,000. This is the one miracle outside of the resurrection that is mentioned in all four Gospels. I'm just curious about what kind of evidence would be necessary for you to establish this as a literal historical event by your own standards.
I don't know that any such evidence could be presented to account or to justify claiming that a miracle occurred. The events, we could establish that specific aspects of the events occurred, but I don't know that something that far removed historically, the supernatural, miraculous nature of it, I don't know that there's any type of evidence, literary evidence, that would suffice.
And this is not just something that we would be setting the Bible up for special criticism for, too. There are a lot of historical writings where historians and scholars will tell you up front, we cannot entirely verify this sort of thing. I mean, there's no real evidence, for example, that Socrates actually existed. There's a lot of debate about that. The histories of Herodotus, which are still sold and studied and circulated, and he was a very, very early historian back in antiquity, writing at the time, but he's well known. It's been shown that a lot of the stuff that he's written in his histories was just, it's the kind of thing that you get when you're a tourist in a foreign country and you have the tour guide who's happy to take your money and tell you whatever crap you want to hear, right? So there are many, many historical documents where unusual events are discussed in such a way to where, there's just no way we can confirm this entirely. Maybe an event really did happen, but does it have the significance that we're being told?
I want to kind of clarify this, because after the conversation, this type of thing has come up several times, and I'll do this quickly, and then you can talk again, I promise. I'm not dismissing that and saying there is no evidence. There is evidence. I mean, it's anecdotal, testimonial type evidence that an event occurred. There may be, for some events, sufficient evidence, including testimonial, anecdotal evidence, for me to acknowledge that an event occurred, and perhaps even an unexplained event occurred. The additional claim that's being made, that, for example, Jesus fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 3 fishes, even if we had enough reports, testimonials, to establish that event occurred in some aspect, we have nothing to establish and assert the miracle nature, the source of this. It's kind of like, and I swear I'm not just trying to diminish this, but it's kind of like if someone has done a card trick for somebody. If you hear them recount what they saw afterwards, it's almost shocking to hear what some people say happened. The reports may be correct, they may be incorrect, but in any case, if I, in front of your face, turned one card into another card, that doesn't tell you anything at all about how I did it. And that's kind of the limitations. Now, there's plenty of things that I have no problem at all accepting happened, and I'd also point out, as I did before, that I don't have a big issue with accepting that Jesus existed. I'm not banging a drum saying, no, there's no historical Jesus. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't consider the existence of Jesus to be this big thing to cast massive doubt on either. It seems to be a serious issue for a lot of atheists, but I've never really thought it was one myself. Another thing to remember is that these were ancient times, and pretty rational, pretty scientific culture in many ways, and even educated people of those times would spread these kind. There was an aura of mysticism and the supernatural that just sort of pervaded life. And
But-
you can read a lot of other histories. For example, Suetonius, again, is another great Roman historian. He'll just report on things like omens and supernatural events,
Yeah.
and right in the context of straightforward historical accounts, and you take these seriously. And people told these stories and believed them, so why wouldn't similar stories have been built up around this rabbi of Jesus, who is apparently extremely popular, and a lot of people talking about him?
Let me actually return to the card trick example. I think kind of as a basic rule of our own experience, I think we can basically assert that, this is not some kind of supernatural intervention when someone does a card trick. I think that sort of example in particular is kind of something that people bring up all the time, kind of as an example. But
okay, what if I made an elephant disappear?
Card tricks are illusions, and I know how to do like a bunch of card tricks. And
What if
so
I made an
there's
elephant disappear?
Made an elephant disappear? That's something different, but it's still.
Copperfield did it.
It's no reason necessarily. It depends on the environment. I would say.
Yeah.
Are you in a magic show, or are you just in the middle of a zoo? I guess there would be two different things we could discuss there. But
the reason we know that the reason you're so comfortable asserting the two different things is because we have knowledge of people doing these things by natural means, intentionally to trick people.
Right.
I have no idea what occurred in the first century around the specific events of the life of Jesus, for example. I have the biblical accounts, and I'm comfortable accepting aspects of those. I don't see sufficient evidence to accept either that miracles occurred or the claims about why they occurred. But the thing is that so many Christians would say, I shouldn't broad brush it. What I've heard from a lot of them is that, well, this is a preconception of yours that is preventing you from accepting. Well, yeah, it's a preconception that is preventing me to accept, and based only on that evidence. But the scenario that they happen to believe in is one where this same God still exists and can still do these miracles, yet will not provide me with the same evidence that those eyewitnesses had.
Yeah.
Why? Why are they more deserving of eyewitness direct? Why is Paul's Damascus Road experience good enough for Paul but not good enough for me?
Well, I guess in the example of Paul, he was a mass murderer that was killing Christians, and he would ultimately become probably the person responsible for spreading Christianity around the world and making it exist today. So I think it's more important that he would have had it than you, because if you became a Christian, you may convert some people to Christianity, but you wouldn't convert millions and millions and make it so that ultimately people far, far, far in the future would know what Christianity is all about.
Okay, then give the experience to Dawkins. But I find that answer just, I apologize, but silly. You're claiming that the people who can do the most get the most. But don't you think that God loves everybody equally and wants them all to go to heaven?
It's not that I'm claiming that people who do the most get the most. This is an issue of one person in particular that would ultimately do.
Okay,
but God is all powerful, and could not He inspire just about anyone with the wherewithal and the sense of dedication that Saul ended up having to do the same kind of work?
I could probably say he probably could have, but I can't say anything like that with any certainty.
Well, if the goal here is to get people to become saved or adhere to whatever particular doctrine you seem to, and I to be fair, I haven't asked yet, so I'm not quite sure what you're espousing, but why wouldn't a God give that revelation to everybody? Why stay hidden from some people? And because, okay, Paul, for example, Paul gets this experience, and your claim is that perhaps it was more important for him to get the experience because this served to convert a lot of people. And I would say that anybody who was converted on the basis of Paul's testimony was unjustified in doing so, because it's David Hume pointed out, a revelation is necessarily first person. To everybody else, it's hearsay. If you got a direct revelation that was equivalent of Paul's and called the show to tell me about it, you couldn't possibly convert me, and I don't think you should expect to, because your experience is not mine, and Paul's experience is not mine.
To the edge of town and go across the track where the viaduct